hands, not seeking the counsel of God, but backsliding into a life of falsehood and deception, and placing himself in the most compromising position in the land of the Philistines, one of the most hated enemies of God's people. 1 Samuel 30, verses 1 to 6. 1 Samuel 30, verses 1 to 6. And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag smitten and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. Then David and his people that were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. David's two wives were taken captive, Ahinoam and Jezreelis, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people were grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. Amen. Chapter 30 simply starts with the words, and it came to pass when David and his men came to Ziklag. That's the town where David and his men were living in the land of the Philistines. That's where their families, their wives and children were. David and his men had just marched off to war, and now were returning and slapping each other on the back and high-fiving and laughing and singing the praises of the Lord. Oh, isn't God wonderful? How he got us out of that mess. He kept us from having to fight against our own brothers. Praise his name. Woo! That was a close one. But then, in all the rivalry, one of them notices off in the distance long plumes of black smoke curling up into the sky. And he screams, "Ziklag!" And then everyone freezes and looks at the billowing black smoke coming up and from the flames of fire that is burning their city and the city of their wives and homes and families, the city of Ziklag. And when they get there, they make the devastating discovery that their wives and children have been taken captive by the Amalekites, another hated enemy of the children of Israel. And now, I want every man in this room to try and fathom what it would be like. Can you imagine the devastation? Can you imagine the absolute hopelessness that would come upon you seeing the city where your home burned by fire, totally gone? But worse, your wife, your children, known may have been captured by the enemy. Who knows where they are? Who knows what is being done to them at that very moment? And this is so true today, folks. Happy families are coming to church. Everything seems to be going great, but then one or both of them loses their hold on God and walks back into their old life, and they stay in this backslidden state for a period of years. And soon you hear that in their course of their wanderings out of God's will, it has cost them their marriage, cost them their jobs, cost them their families, and everything that was near and dear to them is gone. One day it's just all gone. Just like David. And it says in verse 4, that David and they that were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. Amen. They wept until they couldn't cry anymore. Have you ever been like that? Have you ever cried till you couldn't cry anymore? There were no more tears to cry. You know, that'll happen to a Christian who gets out of the will of God, because of the devastating effects of sin on your family, on your life, on your career, on your home, everything that's near and dear to you. Oh, don't get me wrong, guys. You can run off and leave your good wife and family for some little hussy. But there will come a day when your grown children will look you in the face and tell you that they hate your guts. And you will cry until you can't cry anymore. And ladies, you can run off with that sensitive guy that you met online. Or that sensitive guy that understands you at work and is so romantic, so much more romantic than your husband. And you can leave your husband and run off with that dreamboat from work. But there will come a day when your children will look you in the face and tell you that they hate your guts, and you will cry till you can't cry anymore. And Mr. Businessman or Miss Businesswoman, you can go ahead and get involved in that shady business deal and start playing the game because everybody else does. Everybody else says it's all right. Hey, everybody else is doing it that way. And you may think that you've been able to beat the system and get by with it. That you've not made the Lord your business partner. Amen. You know good and well you've been business partners with the devil. And when the time comes that he decides that he wants out, and your business starts to collapse, and you will lose everything, and you will cry and cry and cry until you can't weep anymore. I'm going to say something very, very shocking to you. You're probably saying, oh, Pastor John, there's really not much you can say that would shock me. Okay, but listen to this. Granted, up to this point, this is absolutely the worst day in David's life. But here's my shocking statement. Are you ready for it? In my humble opinion, up to this point, this is also the best day in David's life. Because what burned up in Ziklag were the bonds that had been holding him to the enemy. And the burning of Ziklag was the clean break that David needed that finally broke David loose from the bondage to the enemy forever. Amen. And I know personally that some of my dear flock, some of you have had some devastating days, and you've had some hurtful days that have brought tears into your life. And all we could do as your church family is just